Okay. So I'm just going to I'm going to let Amanda introduce herself. But before that, I'm just going to mention a couple of things. I am Jenna Wells. I am a coordinator within the USED, which stands for the University of Cincinnati Center for Excellence in Developmental Disabilities. We are located in Cincinnati Children's Hospital in the behavioral pediatrics department, but for our purposes, we actually serve all of Ohio. Our programming is grant-based, and we serve all of Ohio and support families along the way. So Ohio Family to Family is a program where we can help families navigate the various systems that all of us navigate in the disability world. Um, and we also, in the P2P program, it's a parent mentoring program where we will train peer mentors and connect them with other family members that could just use a listening ear and a friend and help with that feeling of loneliness that many of us have in this journey. So those are the two programs that I work with. We do have a transition. If anyone is, since this is about teens, I'm assuming most of you are in those transition years. We have a transition expo coming up. It's at Sharonville Convention Center on November 12th. I'll be putting the flyer in the chat in a few minutes for that event. So if you are interested in joining us, you're more than welcome. It's free. Parking's free. And so hopefully all of you can make it out. It's all day. It's 9 to 3 on November 12th. So we hope to see many of your faces there if you live down in the southwest kind of portion where most people are coming from Columbus and south, but it's going to be a big event. So there's going to be lots and lots of resources there. So if you have a question this evening, just letting you know if you have any questions along the way, please put them in the chat. There will be time at the end for a specific Q&A kind of time set apart for question and answers with Amanda. But if you want to just get it out of your brain and you don't want to forget it, feel free to just throw it in the chat. And we might answer some questions along the way too throughout the for a brain break, we can answer a question here and there as well. So so that's kind of how the question and answers go. And we'll wrap up around 8 o'clock. We are asking at the end that there will be an evaluation at the end of this. We ask that you complete that. We are, like I said, grant funded. We like to make sure that our events are what families need and what they want. And so we need that feedback, and Amanda would like that too, to learn from all of you. So please complete that at the end and I'll post the link for that in the chat as well. So it'll be easy to kind of click on and do that. Does anyone have any questions real quick before we get started? All right, awesome. Well, I'm going to introduce the amazing Amanda Tipkemper. She's absolutely fabulous. She is a wealth of information. She's been around the block quite a few times, I would say, especially on the topic that we're talking about this evening. And Amanda, can you tell them a little bit more about yourself and the work that you're doing right now?
I sure will. So I'm Amanda Tipkemper. I am an independent consultant here in the greater Cincinnati area, spreading my wings beyond that even. I also am the part-time director at Kids Thrive, which is a local behavioral health program. All right, let me see if I can get this to advance. All right, so I have a disclaimer. I'm going to go into a little bit more about myself in just a second, but we're going to go there in this talk. We're going to cover a variety of aspects related to puberty, relationships, and sexuality. You're going to hear terms and topics discussed that may make you uncomfortable. While this is important material to learn and talk about, it is encouraged that participants access content and take needed breaks at their discretion. The topics we will be covering are very broad and generalized. We acknowledge and respect that there are a range of experiences, identities, preferences, and choices to be made in these areas. It is simply not possible in a presentation like this, in the time that we have, that to cover the complex ways that race, gender, identity, disability, culture, religion, and personal history intersect in the relationships and sexuality of a person. So it's very individualized when it comes down to it. Our objectives, you've seen it in the flyer when you signed up. We're going to cover adolescence, puberty and hormones, health, relationships, and safety. And there will be plenty of resources incorporated, from websites to curriculums to online tools. I'm going to try not to talk like an auctioneer, but I tend to because there's a lot of content. So a little bit more about me. As I said, I'm Amanda Tipkemper. I've been a special educator and a special education administrator in the greater Cincinnati area for the last 20 plus years, starting my career out at a place called Cincinnati Center for Autism, which was pre-diagnosis through young adulthood, and then moving to the children's home, which is now Best Point Education and Behavioral Health, starting the Height Center for Excellence, and then ultimately overseeing their behavioral health programs and their developmental disability programs from preschool to transition aged. I've worked with adults. I've worked with a variety of diagnoses. The youngest person I've worked with was 16 months old, and the oldest person I've worked with was over 70 years old, had a master's degree, two master's degrees, spoke 8 languages, and had never had a meaningful romantic relationship in their life, right? So, been involved in a lot of program development, worked at nonprofits for the majority of my career, and I'm an ally and an advocate, and you'll hear that throughout, for the people that um, I serve, and that includes parents, and that includes professionals at this point. I'm a consultant, and I really want everyone to do the best that they can with the tools that they have. As I said, the director of education at Kids Thrive. Kids Thrive is a K through 8 behavioral health program across the state of Ohio. And so I'm not going to get into that, but my special interests are health and sex education for all, universal design across environments. So integrating that into educational settings as well as work environments, overall education reform. As a special educator and someone who has specialized in this field for the last 20 years, um, I knew that we can do better. And then overall service gaps and inconsistencies in health education and sex education for people with special needs, intellectual disabilities, diagnoses, behavioral health, mental health. It's just not out there right now, guys. So we'll get started with puberty. So these are questions that have been compiled over my career. I've been teaching sex education since 2012, started that at the Children's Home of Cincinnati when I realized that kids that were in alternative placements often did not get access to these kinds of curriculums. So they might have gotten the basic academic content, but it wasn't to be assumed that they're getting quality health and sex education as well. So these questions from a sex education class, these are from high schoolers with autism and related diagnoses. What's the difference between male and female anatomy? Do a lot of high school students take pictures of themselves naked? So these are high schoolers that have autism, and they're very curious and they want to know and they're seeking knowledge. And they were given the opportunity to put question cards in a box after class. And these were some of the questions. So you'll see a couple more throughout the presentation. So, of course, we know the definition of puberty, the period during which adolescents reach sexual maturity and become capable of reproduction. So, just the logical, right, factual definition. Synonyms are there. I can never say that word, guys. Synonyms. I did it. Puberty onset. You may not know this, and it's surprising. In children in the United States, puberty typically happens between 8.5 and 13 years of age in girls and between 9 and 14 in boys. So I always say it's never too early to start, all right? According to the American Academy of Pediatrics, and that's a hyperlink. So when you get this slideshow, you'll be able to click on these links and it will take you to more information. There's a lot of them, so um, you might feel like you're drinking from a fire hose at times. Children with neurodevelopmental disabilities are generally up to 20 times more likely to begin puberty earlier than their typically developing peers. For some girls, changes may start as early as 6, while boys might begin around age 9. These shifts can bring emotional and physical changes that can feel confusing for a child, especially if they're not being told to expect it. Some of the seen and unseen changes, of course, we know there are physical changes. There's rapid growth. That rapid growth can actually be painful. All right. And if you have a child, a young child that you're caring for that doesn't have language, sometimes they have a hard time expressing that discomfort. All right. Onset of menstruation, the development of breasts for girls, testicular growth for boys, and then the development of body hair. There's also hormonal changes, right? So you'll see changes in mood and in behavior. I'm going to provide anecdotes and I'm going to try to provide only a few throughout because we only have an hour and a half to go, right? But one of the things that I've noticed over my career, and I've worked with a lot of kids across the age spans, is that sometimes you'll see a return of behavior that you haven't seen in a long time, right? So sometime a kid who has kind of leveled out behaviorally will start to show those old behaviors, whether that be self-injurious behavior, whether that be elopement. This is something that I've noticed, and that's anecdotal again from my observations. Definitely can impact sleep. Now, and it can impact metabolism, and metabolism impacts medicine and other things, right? And weight and energy and all those things. So, normal tasks of adolescence include increasing independence from family and a focus on peer relationships. This is just typical what happens, but guess what? It also happens if your kid has any sort of diagnosis. All of us progress through puberty and adolescence to become sexually mature adults. I have had the opportunity to provide this training a lot. I haven't even tried to count, but over the last 12 years, many, many times. And sometimes we'll have parents who are like, can we just skip this part? Can we just skip adolescence? And I'm sorry to say that, unfortunately, we're not able to do that, guys. Um, One of the things that I think is important to know if you have a kid who has a diagnosis that presents them in any way that's different than typical development, right? um, is what does typical development look like? And some of you might have other kids, you might have older kids, right? Some of you might only have one child. You've never really witnessed or experienced or supported development before, or you just need to get a refresher on this, right? So it's nice to first of all just say what's going on generally in typical development. And you'll see there's, I mean, this is just an example of a chart that you can use, but there's faith development, physical development, brain development, mental and intellectual development. And there's some that this example, for example, goes through the lifespan. So live out loud. Don't assume that kids will observe and understand that these changes happen to everyone. And that is something that I've observed a lot is a lot of kids aren't even aware that their body is going to continuously change. And that is a surprise to them. Or they're figuring out that their body is changing, but they don't know what to expect in those changes. And I've worked with, I had one student who at the age of 16 was relieved to learn that he wasn't going to start his period because it was just assumed that he knew that. I don't know how we somehow acquire that knowledge over our life, right? Somewhere along the line we acquire that knowledge, but sometimes our kids needs to be explicitly taught and he didn't know and he was happy. It was good news. So explicit and direct instruction. Children may need help to learn appropriate touch in social situations and correct names for body parts, for example. As your child approaches and enters puberty, discussions can include changes due to puberty, such as body hair, erections, menstruation, managing sexual behaviors such as wet dreams, masturbation, gynecological women's health care for girls, including periods and mood changes related to menstrual periods, and then fertility, birth control, prevention and of sexually transmitted infections. I understand that there is a pretty good sized group here, and you all have a different reason for being here or a different person that you're here for, right? That you're thinking about. So these conversations and everything in this presentation are going to have to be prioritized and then tailored to meet the needs of your family, that individual, your organization. coordination and collaboration around puberty is really, really, really important. And again, I was an administrator, I've been a teacher, I've been an instructor, I've been in a variety of roles. I've gone on outings, I've been in outdoor day camps with kids, with large groups of kids. The communication is just key to everyone's success, right? Everyone feeling successful. But when it comes to puberty and adolescence, it really I feel like the communication almost has to increase because there's so many changes happening so quickly. Regular communication with primary care specialists, school as applicable around menstrual care. So, um, my one of my major recommendations, if there's anyone who's carrying or is a girl out there, is start monitoring your menstrual cycles and your symptoms. There is a pattern a lot of times, and if there is not a pattern, then that's something that needs to be checked into, right? That's something that the doctor needs to know about because there should be a pattern. It should be happening typically on a monthly basis. You shouldn't be experiencing, crippling pain, and there should be some sort of, you know, I mean, there just should be some sort of regularity to the whole entire experience, right? Now that develops over time, but it's something to monitor. Again, teaching these girls to monitor, and I've worked with girls who have no language, all right, and who academically are very behind their peers and are able to manage their own menstrual cycles, all right. Now I've also worked with girls who have, you know, average to above average academic abilities and really struggle to monitor it, so, and to manage it. So it's very diverse. Communication around hygiene needs and issues, medication reviews. So hormone changes and overall growth can impact effectiveness of medicine and that metabolism again. So that's something to really lean into as your kid starts to grow in height and size. Follow up on growth and development. So just making sure that you're monitoring those things and it's not going, too fast, but it's not also going too slow. Dietary needs may change, right? It might need to supplement things. And then, of course, mood and behavior changes, sleep, mental health concerns. A lot of times, so my anecdote for this, when I went to the Children's Home of Cincinnati, and this was in 2012, there was still not a lot of talk around providing kids with autism and developmental disabilities with mental health counseling, right? It was actually kind of taboo. And that was something that I brought to a group of families at one point, and I had actually some families pushed back and they said, we don't want to have those services in that program because we don't want our kids to be around kids who have like major mental health issues. And I was like, every teenager can benefit from mental health services, right? Every teenager is struggling to figure out who they are in the world and who they want to grow up to be and all those things. But then if you have a developmental disability, if you have a behavioral health concern, if you have any sort of a diagnosis, it makes it even more difficult because it's already hard to feel like you can figure out how to fit in and what is cool and what's not cool and all the things you guys have experienced yourself, right? We all were teenagers at one point. It's not a fun period of time of our life. So definitely something that can be considered when you're working with someone who's going through puberty. Here's another way to, now this is controversial and crazy, guys. I'm here to tell you. But one of the things that you can do is coordinate with your school around individualized education plans. So I'm sure a lot of you are like, I've I've never heard of incorporating sex and health education. We'll get there. We'll get there in the future of this presentation. But IEPs can include goals around health and sex education, especially if they are priorities that need to be addressed in the school environment. I'm going to hop on a soapbox. I'm going to hop back off real quick. As a special educator and someone who has overseen, written, developed, coordinated, collaborated, and corrected, I don't even know how many IEPs. I really don't at this point in my life, right? It's really, really important that we as a team prioritize what those goals are. I have worked on IEPs that are over 10 goals, and I'm telling you that unfortunately, what ends up happening is you spend more time with material creation, data sheet creation, reporting, collaborating, all the things that are paperwork, right? And behind the scenes stuff. And it takes away from the quality of service, especially if you have an intervention specialist who has a caseload of 12 and up, right? And that unfortunately can be the reality for a lot of intervention specialists. So anyway, We should always prioritize IEP goals to be around what are the issues of care, safety, and welfare that we need to address, right? Number one. And then what are the skills that need the most support and the most attention? So there's my soapbox, jumping back off. Here are some examples of IEP goals. All right. And these IEP goals were created by ChatGPT. All right. So I have written so many IEP goals in my life, and knew I was just doing this for this presentation, and I just wanted to come up with some examples. All right, guys. So forgive me. The whole entire presentation is a culmination of my experience and my colleague TJ, who I should mention, who helped me create so much of this content. But these are AI generated IEP goals. So maybe that is correctly identifying major body parts and their functions. Knowledge is power, guys. You got to know what your body parts are. And yes, do you walk around naming your body parts all the time? Maybe if you work in preschool or you work with younger kids, you're working on that. But for the most part, you don't. But you take for granted all the knowledge that's in your brain. And I've worked with kids who can't tell me that they have a sore throat because all they know is head, shoulders, knees and toes, eyes and ears, and mouth and nose, and there's no throat in there, right? So it's really important, especially for health purposes, to teach those body parts and their functions. Very functional skill, right? Um, We'll verbalize and demonstrate understanding of consent and safety procedures. So saying no, recognizing unsafe situations, and role play in scenarios, right? That might be something that's a priority for the kid that you're thinking about. And then um, differentiate between appropriate and inappropriate touch with specific relationships. Again, we're going to get there in more detail in the future of this presentation. Now, again, it may be more appropriate to work on certain skills with related service providers outside of school, and such as hygiene. So, um, again, somebody who I've worked with a variety of age ranges is everything, but like my most recent experience and my most in-depth experience recently has been with a lot of high schoolers. All right. And I like working with kids going through puberty. It's not something that I work with a lot of professionals that love working with little itty bitty kids, and I work with my hairy scaries, and that's what I've called them, because they can be intimidating and they can, be puzzling and they can be just challenging and complex, but I really have always enjoyed it. But one of the things that I've noticed is sometimes our related service providers will work on hygiene skills at school, and there is nothing more horrifying than walking down a hallway with a toothbrush and toothpaste with a related service provider and your peers are around you. Just food for thought. Okay, guys, just think about that as a teenager, as a person, as a human, right? It's just something to consider. Is that how is that perceived by the person who's walking down the hallway with a related service provider? Um, but with hygiene, start early, practice regularly. The earlier, the better. We always provide an example. My colleague TJ and I, TJ Nistidy, Dr. TJ Nistidy is my co-presenter, and we have co-presented for years on this topic, and sometimes we do it alone, and here I am. But start early and practice regularly. We have a family who has multiple kids with disabilities, and that family has chosen to start very early, around the age of 8 or 9, teaching their kid to use deodorant because they know by the time they get to 11, 12, whenever those hormones really start kicking in, it'll become a part of the routine, right? It won't be after there's body odor developing, it'll be before. Establish easy to maintain routine for toothbrushing, bathing, hand washing, etc., as scheduled and as routine as you can make it. Consider sensory needs. This is something that I've come across so many times with showering. So I have a kid that I've known his whole entire life. He's a kid I've known since he was 16 months old. He's 23 now. Anyway, we finally figured out with the help of an amazing therapist that the reason he was struggling with his hygiene routine was because of the water pressure. The water pressure was too hard. So I don't know how we came across that, and it would be a long explanation, but ultimately it really helped his shower routine. All right. Shaving. How do you want to shave? You want to shave with a razor? Do you want to shave with an electric razor? Is electric razor too loud? Are there different, decibel levels for these things? Menstruation, so many options. And Children's Hospital has an OBGYN clinic here in Cincinnati that specializes and can really meet the needs of so many different needs around menstruation, especially the sensory needs. Deodorant, so try different options like roll-on, spray. Maybe it just is soap and water all the time. Another thing that's really important is to maintain an extra set of clothes for the school and community and keep those sizes updated. I've been a girl. I've been a girl on my period in the wrong place at the wrong time. All right. It stinks. It really stinks, but it definitely stinks when you're in high school and you're surrounded by peers. So, or like if you're at homecoming, goodness gracious, just be ready. All right. Toilet training, begin pairing with bathroom as soon as possible. Partner with your occupational and your physical therapist or with those clinical and or educational goals. And then, of course, there are always further considerations and adaptations for wheelchair users and those with dexterity and mobility challenges. So again, guys, I'm going over a bunch of content tonight. So please take this information and tailor it to your needs. Some tips for the talk. Oh my goodness. So, most parents don't want to go there with their kids, right? And my dad, he he decided he was the one who was going to try to have the talk with me at the age of 16. And I was like, Dad, come on. I've been through so many health classes and also read books. And anyway, so I realized that a lot of parents don't really look forward to having this talk with their kids, and vice versa. Just, the kids don't really look forward to having the talk with their parents. My daughter, of course, had me, and she's 23, so we had so many talks. But here are some tips for the talk, some links for tips for the talk. Okay, I said it right. Um, I'm not going to click on all these, but you can click on them. I encourage you to, and have lots of great resources in there. All right. Here's my meme that cracks me up. So, welcome to being a parent of a teenager. Prepare for a large amount of eye rolling, emotional outbursts, and thoughts of running away. And that's just the parents. And here's another resource for everybody. So this is Parents of Teenager Survival Checklist. It's kind of old school. Some of the things are old school in there, but again, it's just a starting point to even get your mind thinking about like what do they know how to do and they don't know how to do, right? Like that might start you in a direction. Here's a real life local resource. So, Surviving and Thriving in the Real World is not only local, but now it's gone virtual. It's by our very own Dr. Amy Duncan. If you're familiar with her, she's a gem. She's a gem and she is in the greater Cincinnati area doing amazing work. This is something that I've seen in action. Okay. So at the Heights Center of Excellence, for years and years and years, we had this incorporated and it had became a regular part of the offerings to those families to sign up for these classes. So this is just a way to work with your kid on those daily living skills. And there's daily living skills are the everyday tasks that people do to take care of themselves at home, school, work, and in the community. So Dr. Amy Duncan and her team work with parents and their kids to identify goals, come up with incentives, and then work all the way through the process. And I've seen it do some really amazing things. Another resource, amaze.org. This is an online resource. So maybe you have a kid who's like, all right, I'm curious, but I really definitely don't want to hear this from you. Okay. This is a place to go. There are so many topics. There's so many videos. I think they're all animated, 2 to 5 minutes, just depending on the topic. So pretty easy, like bite-sized pieces too. So another great resource to check out. And then I'm going to pause. So, do we have any questions, burning questions for the puberty section before we go into healthy relationships?
There's one quick question here. It says, will there be something available to print or download with all of these links? So, Amanda, you can answer that, but I'll just let everyone know that you will be getting a link to this exact presentation in PowerPoint. So we're recording this, and so the recording will be on YouTube on the You Said YouTube channel. We'll send that out when it gets posted. But before that, you will get a link to this presentation. So in the presentation, you will have access to all of this information.
There we go. And the links are hyperlinks. So you just have to go through the slides and click on those. All right. Um, we're going to go into healthy relationships. Here are, again, questions from a sex education class. What can a husband and a wife do on vacation, honeymoon, or retirement? Sexually, for fun, and non-sexually. And then another question, how can you start a relationship with someone that you have a crush on? So again, if you join late, these are questions from classes that I've taught over the years. These are real questions from high schoolers with autism. Most of the kids had autism or a related diagnosis. I want to expand. I saw something in the chat regarding, especially if they're nonverbal, and I just want to make sure that you do know that I am trying to consider the broad needs. I've worked with kids who have absolutely no language, and I've worked with kids who never stop talking. I've worked with the spectrum. I've worked with kids who have a lot of language but have a really hard time understanding um, auditory instructions. And then I've worked with kids who can't say a word and understand everything and can read everything and are always, always listening. All right, on to the next slide. Relationships, healthy relationships. So, um, I didn't mention this, and it's one of my favorite things. Monday, Wednesday, and Friday of fall semester, I teach healthy relationships one to TAP students, and TAP kids are the Transition and Access Program at the University of Cincinnati through their IDD Center. These are kids with an intellectual disability diagnosis, and I get to teach them Healthy Relationships 1, and I get to teach the freshmen Healthy Relationships 1, and I get to teach the sophomores Healthy Relationships 2. And I'm going to reference some curriculums in here that I use in those classes, but also I've used outside of those classes and are broadly used. So, research consistently shows that adolescents with physical and developmental disabilities often participate less in social activities and have fewer opportunities for intimate relationships compared to their typically developing peers. People with physical and developmental disabilities are interested in having a social life, and individuals with physical and developmental disabilities may be here we go, infantilized. Sorry, guys. I have such a hard time with that word. TJ usually reads that slide, all right? Or treated as though they are much younger than their actual age, impacting their ability to develop age-appropriate social skills and make connections with same-age peers. And I think a lot of times people are like, yeah, Amanda, right? Like, of course. But we have come across so many families over the years that, and we're going to get to this also in the future of the slideshow, that do not do not think that their kid is ever going to have that relationship. And I will tell a really quick story. I had the very first couple I dealt with when I worked at the Children's Home High School, which is now the Heights Center of Excellence. And this couple were getting a little too intimate on the car ride to school, right? So they carpooled together. They'd been dating for a while, and the parents like didn't even realize that they were in a relationship at first, right? So we had a family meeting. We all came together, and the parents were like, "This, I can't believe this is happening." And they said they can't believe this is happening because they never dreamed that their kids were going to have this opportunity to be in a relationship. They didn't want them to necessarily be engaging in inappropriate physical contact, on the ride to school or at school, but at the same time, um, we all just took a moment to appreciate the fact that these kids did have an opportunity and really were enjoying each other and the relationship and ended up having a short but successful relationship, I think. Stayed friends afterwards, right? So there may be problems communicating effectively with their bodies, whether that be because they have a hard time with nonverbal body language, or maybe because they have a physical or mobility um, challenge, and they may also have difficulty reading another person's body language. And let's just be real, people don't necessarily tell the truth, right? So they'll say, like, when some girl's giving you a fake number and act like she's interested, but she's actually lying to you because she's giving you a fake number, right? I mean, so it's hard to interpret those things for everybody, for all of us. Difficulty interpreting others' emotions and intentions can also lead to social confusion and result in poor social problem solving. Here's an example of this is a curriculum that I used for years and years and years. It's called Intimate Relationships and Sexual Health, a curriculum for teaching adolescents and adults with high functioning autism spectrum disorder. So that dated itself, right? And here's the thing about these curriculums is that I don't know why we have to put particular diagnoses or labels on them, but a lot of times the resources inside are useful for everyone, okay? So here's an example of one of those handouts, though, the stages of friendships, and you can see that it's teaching this particular lesson is teaching about a timeline and how you go from being strangers to being casual acquaintances to being friends to having a deep friendship. Um, so stages of relationships should be and probably need to be explicitly taught. How to move to the next stage and an approximate timeline for doing so also needs to be taught. And then knowing that in real life, moving too fast or too slow can be a problem for anyone, right? So, my parents dated for, I think, 6 months before they were engaged, and then they were married a year later, right? Like in today's terms, I feel like that's lightning speed. I know people that date for 5 to 10 years before they ever get married. So, and we know there's still people out there eloping, right? All right, here's another curriculum resource to talk about healthy relationships in those stages. And this one I actually use quite a bit. I use it in and out of the UC class, and it's just a good framework. All right, you don't have to get married to the labels or the colors or anything, but again, it's something for you to read through and then be like, how can I adjust this to my particular needs, whether that be a classroom or whether that be a family. So in this one, the circles, you can see it starts with concentric circles. On the outside is a stranger circle, and then you have the orange wave circle, and then you have the yellow handshake circle, and then the green faraway hug circle, the blue hug circle, and the um, private circle, the purple private circle. Purple is yourself. All right. So that's only you. And you know that you have thoughts and feelings that you only share with yourself. Right. Um, and then it actually has a curriculum that shows how to move in from the stranger circle to being, friends with someone if you're interested in becoming friends with someone, and also to know when someone is a circle jumper and they're not necessarily minding the social boundaries, right? So this curriculum teaches part one is social distance, part two is relationship building, and then part three is sexuality education. I will tell you it is pricey. I do not own it personally because it is $2,000. But maybe you see this. Oh, let me see if I can do this. This little, hey, look at that. I got a laser pointer. If you look down here, this is from Pinterest. All right. So you can find all sorts of resources out there, but the curriculum itself is great. The videos they're a little dated and they're pretty funny, but it's good stuff. Another resource that is becoming more and more well known, and there's lots of providers actually in the greater Cincinnati area and even now Northern Kentucky providing the peers classes. And this is a program for the education and enrichment of relational skills. It is an evidence-based social skills program, so that's rare, just so you know. There's not many evidence-based social skills programs, and evidence-based is a great term to use in an IEP meeting because as we know in special education, we need to use as evidence-based practices, right? So here's some example of the curriculum content, trading information. So that's having a conversation, right? Trading information is the precursor to two-way conversations. Electronic communication, it has like steps and rules that you can use. So what is it? The two before, wait, um, not before nine or not before 9 a.m., not before 9 p.m. I think that's one of the rules in the electronic communication. Choosing appropriate friends, appropriate use of humor, starting and joining conversations, exiting conversations, good sportsmanship, get-togethers, handling arguments, changing reputations, handling teasing and embarrassing feedback, handling physical bullying, handling cyberbullying, and then minimizing rumors and gossips. So this is, again, a great curriculum that you can actually partake in. There's classes around the greater Cincinnati area, or you can buy this curriculum and just read it and get some tips and tricks. Again, I think that one's around 70 to 80 bucks. There's a book for adolescents and there's a book for young adults. The hidden curriculum is one of my favorites. It's been around since 2004 and I've had it for a long time. I've referenced it so much and it's amusing as well, just because as you read through it, you realize how many of these unspoken rules you don't think about. You don't think have to be, again, explicitly and directly taught. So here's some examples of some of the social skills it talks about. So being a good listener, smiling and looking interested, even if you're not, asking about the other person's interests, complimenting, phone and social media etiquette, flirting, and this is one of my favorites, recovering when something goes wrong. I will tell you, I've worked with so many kids that this is the main skill that they really need to work on, right? This is the thing that somehow like that elusive, typical, neurotypical skill of being able to screw up and then still have friends, right? Social skills and application are elusive, right? So again, they're hidden. They differ across age. They differ across gender. They differ across cultures. They differ depending on who you are, who you're with, and then they differ across environments. So yeah, I mean, easy peasy, right? The example that I like to provide in this hidden curriculum is slide is how we figure out what social behavior is in bathrooms, right? And um, in men's bathrooms, right? And I want you to kind of visualize this with me. When you walk in, let's just visualize there's three urinals, right? So a man knows when he walks in that he shouldn't just go in and go to the middle urinal typically, right? For some reason, he knows that he should go to one of those far urinals. And then when the second guy comes in, he somehow knows what? Does everybody know? He knows you don't go to this middle urinal and stand right next to the guy and say, "Hey, your shoes look great." No, you go to the third, farther away urinal and you don't make eye contact typically, or you might make a little chitty chat depending on how social you are. Meanwhile, in the women's bathroom, it is a melee, and people are tossing toilet paper to each other under the stalls, and they're talking and they're commenting on their shoes, and yeah, and they're talking. It's a much more social atmosphere a lot of times. So that's just an example from the hidden curriculum. Here's a way to maybe sit down with someone and brainstorm. And this is just, I mean, again, an example of something to go off of, right? Because as we have discussed throughout I have discussed with you throughout this presentation, you have to apply your family dynamic, maybe, those cultural connotations, or sometimes it's going to be dependent on where a kid's coming from. Because I'm going to tell you something, guys. If you have been in foster care for many, many years and you're a multi-system youth, your idea and definition of a healthy relationship is very, very different than someone who has lived safely in suburbia and hasn't had a lot of traumatic experiences, right? Like you just want a roof over your head that's consistent and doesn't have any, strings attached. So again, you have to take this and define it and really work it for who you're working with and who you are supporting. So here are some examples. I'm not going to read through all of them. I'm checking my time. But healthy relationship, unhealthy relationship, you might choose not to go into potentially abusive relationship to start, right? Maybe you just start with healthy and unhealthy, right? Here are some references when it comes to the social participation and peer interaction. So if you just want more information on that, when it comes to talking about the desire and the current status of romantic and intimate relationships with individuals with developmental disabilities, physical and developmental disabilities. I'm going to take another pause to see if there's questions and also to give a little bit of another disclaimer.
If you have a question, feel free to unmute and just ask Amanda since we don't have any in the chat right now.
All right. And there is time at the very end. If you joined us late, there will be time at the very end for more Q&A. So there's asterisks, as you can see, because I just want to give a trigger warning. We're getting into sexuality, and I'm going to share some statistics that might be troubling, upsetting, um, might make you mad. They make me mad. So it's just a warning, just a heads up. All right. So here are some more questions from a sex ed class. Um, can having sex cause you to get herpes and or any facial, physical, or internal deformities? And then on the other question, how many sexually transmitted diseases are there and are any fatal? So again, these are questions from high schoolers with autism and related diagnoses. These are real questions that they asked, they're curious about because they didn't know. I'm going to start with some stats. So according to the Bureau of Justice Statistics from 2009 to 2014, I'm sorry, the National Crime Victimization Survey, people with disabilities were more than 3 times likely than non-disabled people to experience serious violent crime. I'm going to summarize a little bit. In addition, having multiple disabilities can increase that person's risk, and children with mental health or intellectual disabilities are almost 5 times more likely than their non-disabled peers to experience sexual abuse. That's from this link, okay, right here, the American Progress link. If you go to the NPR investigation, it's more up to date. I think it was from 2017 or 2018. And at that point, they're saying what is reported is 7 times higher than what typical people experience. Sexuality and disability. So people with developmental disabilities, unfortunately, are often seen as asexual, sexually naive, or sexually deviant. Individuals with developmental disabilities have sexual desires and are exposed to sexually based materials. So 84% of adults in an extensive support needs living, wait, with extensive support needs living in a residential facility reported being sexually active, but did not know about contraceptives. And there's a link to that. For teenagers less than 18 years old, and this is a really like crazy statistic, guys, 90% of boys and 60% of girls have seen porn. I didn't know this. Like when my daughter was that age, and when I told her this quote, she was like, yeah. I mean, she was so flippant. And I was like, oh, on average, a kid is 8 to 11 years old when they first encounter porn. Porn sites get more views than Netflix, Amazon, and Twitter combined. Now, I've also heard that there's new maybe legislation, maybe somebody can confirm this in the chat that you're going to actually have to provide some sort of form of identification to access online pornography in the future. So we'll see. Transgender and non-binary people are up to 6 times more likely to also have autism. Now, again, there's an article. I encourage you to check it out. I was surprised too. This intersection has researchers trying to understand the connection and how society views these identities. So, I mean, challenge upon challenge upon challenge when it comes to fitting in, finding community, right? No matter how you feel about it, that's just that. I try to not be very biased when I talk about this, but it's just harder and harder to find community when you have so many things that make you different or make it difficult for you to relate to people, and for them to relate to you. So let's talk about a lack of comprehensive health and sex education. This one really gets me, guys. It really gets me because I'm a health and sex educator and I've been advocating for this since 2012. And these are pretty, I mean, these are current statistics. So approximately 97% of neurotypical youth receive some form of sex education, whereas less than 50% of youth with IDD receive comprehensive sex education. I have more stats than that. I could talk about stats all day long about this, but we'll go forward for the sake of time. In Ohio, curriculum is not required to be comprehensive, medically accurate, or include instruction on topics such as consent. And it's comma, this, comma, this, comma, this, comma, this, right? And there's a link again if you want to learn more about that. Psychus is, I don't know what it stands for. I do, but I can't tell you right now. It has state profiles for the whole entire United States. It also has the sex ed content standards recommended. So like the model sex education content standards on their website. They're not comprehensive health and sex education, they're sex education content standards. And then if you want to fact check or just learn more information about um, sex education for individuals with intellectual disabilities, there's some articles there. So what is a comprehensive sex education? CSE, if you ever see those initials, they may mean that. So essential content and skills. And this is those national sexuality education standards include consent and healthy relationships, anatomy and physiology, puberty and adolescent sexual development, gender identity and expression, sexual orientation and identity, that should say identity, sexual health, and then interpersonal violence. Some more specific examples of topics in those separate content standards would be consent and choice, the ability to say no and have it to be respected, scientifics and slang names for body parts. It's important to know slang because people can use slang against you, right? They can make you, I mean, the safest scenario, the best case scenario is they can make you a butt of a joke by using their slang, right? And you wouldn't even know it. And that sucks. Good touch and bad touch, public versus private behavior, people of trust, very important to have people of trust in our life, menstruation management, sexually transmitted diseases, and then pregnancy and childbirth. All right, this is troubling. I'm here to tell you, all right, especially if you're someone who has is here today because you care deeply about someone who has a diagnosis. Um, there's a myth around stranger danger, and that's not what we have to worry about, especially when it comes to sexual abuse of individuals with intellectual disabilities or developmental disabilities. And the stats are here. So sexual abuse is perpetrated by 41% are service providers, 24% are family, 20% friends, neighbors, and acquaintances, 9% peers, 6% strangers. And the summary of that troubling stat is that 94% are people that the victim already knows. So when we talk about consent, and every one of these topics that I've brought up so far and that I'm about to get into could be probably a full day, right? They could be a full day of training and learning and research. We talk about the fact that it's not just the first no, right? That is the case for anyone. You say no once, people who want to take advantage of you, maybe that's a salesperson, even, right? No offense to salespeople out there, but you're taught not to accept the first no, right? So people who are persuasive or people that are trying to sell something to you or someone who's trying to take advantage of you is not typically going to be like, oh, you're right. You obviously are not interested in what I'm trying to give to you. So I'm going to leave. Thanks for the opportunity. No, that's not how it happens. And it's not even the second or the third no. And sometimes it's not just in one incident, right? Sometimes it can be like wearing someone down. So it's it's troubling and it's difficult, but TJ Nastidi, my co-presenter in this topic a lot of times, and one of the brave people out there in the greater Cincinnati talking about this topic, um, often would share stories from his standpoint. And he was working at Hamilton County DDS as their psychologist, and he was often brought into court to have to see if there was consent and see, where a person's ability to consent started and stopped, and if that person had been taken advantage of. And he had stories that he would share that unfortunately reinforce this. So, what do we do? Knowledge is power, people. We teach, we teach, we teach, we teach. Comprehensive sex education is a necessity for all. And for those of you that are hesitant or concerned or scared, first of all, I'm going to talk about this slide, but I will tell you that just from a day-to-day standpoint, as someone who taught sex education and health education in a school, all right, in the Heights Center of Excellence, when we started there, when I started there were 18 kids. When I left there were about 130 kids. And you didn't hear, like, kids were not running down the halls like penis, penis, penis. They weren't like using their newfound knowledge to upset or embarrass or take advantage of people. And that was my very, very, very common, like I'm telling you, experience was that the knowledge stayed inside, but I hope that it was being, you know, digested and then applied. That you didn't see kids that were using this knowledge inappropriately a lot of times, right? And I think the great majority of the time, they just really appreciated the opportunity to be given it. And when I say, like, so at the Heights Center, where I had the most time, right, seeing either teaching or training staff or watching staff apply this curriculum, it was to kids who had no language at all, right? And to kids who were twice exceptional and gifted and had a diagnosis. All right. So we were able to modify and adapt this curriculum to meet a variety of kids' needs. So it's possible. I'm here to tell you. Um, so why is it needed? Scientific evaluations of sex education, HIV prevention, and unintended pregnancy prevention programs that provide information on abstinence as well as condoms and contraceptive use have consistently found that these programs cause young people to delay intercourse, reduce the frequency of intercourse, reduce the number of sexual partners they have, and increase condom and contraceptive use. And again, there's information there is probably even updated since then. Encourage you to check out these links and learn more about whatever topic you're here for. Here's another resource. Now, again, this isn't hyperlinked, and the other books aren't hyperlinked. So you'll have to like Google those, and you can buy them online. This is just an example of um, a sexual assessment. And it's a checklist, just a yes, no. And I just kind of screenshotted one of the pages on here. So you can see that on here it says, can the child differentiate between public and private places? Can they differentiate between public and private behaviors? Can the child say no assertively and at appropriate time? So, yes, I'm saying that we should teach our kids to say no. Absolutely, especially when we have the opportunity. We're going to talk more about that in the future as well. So here's just another example of a checklist. If you're like, I don't even know where to start, I have no idea. This is overwhelming me. I can't wait till you stop sharing resources with me. All right. I'm going to pause for a second and see if there's any questions or. Turn that on. Okay, moving on. So, oh, the ring of safety. This is I'm going to get into the specific if you don't want to flip your head upside down to read all those categories. So a guy named Dave Hingsberger, who was a disability advocate and ally and an amazing human being who's no longer with us, unfortunately, a great advocate for teaching sex education to individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities, and also encouraging people to have healthy and safe and sometimes sexual relationships. So we're going to go into ring of safety, dignity of risk, body rights, and consent. And man, I'm doing pretty good, guys. So this is just a visual of his that he created at one point. Here are the topics. So knowledge is power. Again, you're going to hear me say that so many times. Someone who listens is really important. So again, that trusted person who is someone who listens, not someone who tells, not someone who preaches, not someone who corrects, someone who listens. Understanding personal rights, and I have an example of those coming up. Healthy self-concept and self-confidence. In that, in the slide that has the tips for the talk, there's actually one of those links talks about how to support and promote a healthy self-concept and self-confidence. Options for healthy sexuality. And again, you'd rather it be healthy and safe, right? Um, and a lot of times individuals are going to express that sexuality in some way, all right? And they have to because it is a natural part of development, of human development, right? And we all figure out ways to deal with it. Sex education, of course, privacy awareness. And this is something that might be like, I don't know exactly what you mean there, but a lot of times, unfortunately, the privacy of people with intellectual and developmental disabilities is just not respected in the same way it is with typical people, right? Unfortunately, and I encourage families at a young age to start taking their kids into the bathrooms and into private places to change their diapers. And I know how difficult that can be, especially as you get a bigger and bigger kid on your hands if they don't have the option of being toilet trained, but walking in on people during their bathroom routine or just figuring out ways to create the opportunity for privacy. It's just something. And as you age and become an adult, if you're going into group homes, and I know that the adult service world is really trying to work on this and trying to train people to really appreciate the fact that, these people with developmental disabilities are not in your workplace, but you actually are in their home, right? And how we respect and approach that. Um, so that's a little bit on privacy awareness. And then again, the ability to non-comply. I have been in this field, as you can see, I've got some gray hairs. I've been in this field for a minute. And I will tell you that I look back on some of the interventions and our compliance procedures when I was much younger and new to this field, and I I'm sad about it. I'm just sad about it. All right. And I think it's something that we as practitioners, people who, and I have family now, I have friends who have kids. I mean, this is very personal as well as a professional role for me, right? But um I just want to be better, right? That's all we want to do is get better and be better. So I have to forgive myself for not knowing better then, and now I do know better, right? So how can I support and promote the ability to non-comply and compliance versus consent. And I actually did a presentation recently just on that, on consent and the difference between compliance and consent and what's important when and how we shape that. There's a resource to the ring of safety components if you want to learn more about that. One of my favorite concepts to share with people, and a lot of you hopefully have heard of this now because I've noticed in the trainings over the years that I've given that more and more people are familiar with this concept. So the dignity of risk is the notion that one has options from which to choose is often more important than the particular option one initially selects. So the notion that one actually has options to choose from instead of being like, this is what you're eating, this is what you're wearing, this is where you're going, right? Um, the fact that they're given options is the most important notion. Here's a quote, oh my goodness, from 1972, you all right? So you're going to notice in the citation that it says the dignity of risk and it's something, but it's old, and this is how long we've been talking about this and not necessarily applying it, right? Many of our best achievements came the hard way. We took risks, we fell flat, suffered, picked ourselves up, and tried again. Sometimes we made it, sometimes we did not. Even so, we were given the chance to try. Persons with special needs need these chances too. And that is true. Um, the example I give here, I'm a divorced person, all right? I've had more than one relationship in my life. And there's not a lot of people I know. I do know people. I know a handful of people who have been with the same person since junior high or high school, right? Have only had one love their whole entire life, but that's not the case for all of us, right? So a lot of us out there and a lot of you in this audience have had your heart broken, right? Or you've broken someone's heart. Um, you've come up with your own guardrails and guidelines for what you want in a relationship and priorities based on those experiences that have not always been good. And people with developmental disabilities, people with special needs, people with behavioral health concerns, they need the same opportunity. Um, and we just have to figure out how to do that um, and to sort out what is our duty of care versus the dignity of risk. This is a newer resource that I came across. I think it's from Australia, and you can learn more about that down here. The duty of care is the responsibility of organizations and the people who work in them to ensure that they do no harm to the people they support. But it doesn't mean the organization has to protect the person from themselves. Now. And we have to work on that as a team a lot of times and figure out what those guidelines and guardrails are for certain people, right? The dignity of risk, on the other hand, refers to the right of an individual to make choices and to take risks in order to learn, grow, and have a better quality of life. Inherent to the idea of dignity of risk is the idea that life experiences come with an element of risk. They do, which even the best planning and support cannot eliminate. The right to make choices for self-determination is assumed until it is established that assistance is required. This can be hard. And it's, again, if you're the parent of a younger child, then you probably have those guardrails, right? Those pillows wrapped a little tighter right now. But as a kid develops and grows and learns, and as we teach them and give them knowledge and help them understand that cause and effect and consequence, we can start to loosen up and identify what are the things that they can learn for themselves that are not going to put them in grave danger, right? Or hurt them in a way that cannot be um, healed. Here's the example of body rights that I shared that I was going to earlier that I said I was going to show you all. And this is from Teaching Children with Down Syndrome About Their Bodies, Boundaries, and Sexuality. Again, it says Down syndrome. And again, if you read these, they're adapted from there. If you read these, they're not specific to Down syndrome, right? We can use these. I use them for myself, all right? You can use them for yourself. I encourage you to because your body belongs to you. So I go over these in class. Sometimes it's a fill in the blank. Sometimes it's a Quizlet. Sometimes, just depends on the kid. It might be, matching words. You can use Velcro and have words on top of the words and matching. So there's a variety of ways to reinforce body rights. Um, my body belongs to me. No one can touch me if I don't want to be touched. I should not touch others if they don't want to be touched. And for those of you, if there's anybody out there who knows me, you probably know that I'm a hugger. And I over the years teaching these classes, I'm like, I need to stop hugging people without their consent. So I'm working on that. Like I really am like trying to figure out like, hey, I should not touch others if they do not want to be touched, and I cannot assume that everybody wants a hug. All right. No one can make me touch their private parts if I don't want to. No one should touch my private parts without permission. If someone forces me to share my body when I don't want to, I should tell. And I usually say I should tell a trusted adult or I should tell a trusted person. And then my favorite thing to chant like a mantra at every class is it is okay to say no. And everybody fills it in and it's a great time. And you can do it in sign language, or you can stop, or there's a variety of ways to have everybody practice saying no. You can even get one of those easy buttons. Isn't that from Staples? Oh, right here.
No.
See? So many ways to teach no. Here are some ideas for incorporating consent into daily activities. Respect no and stop. So when you can, right? When it's not an issue of care, safety, and welfare, how can we respect no and stop? What are the things that we can accept? And maybe we even explain that to the person that we're supporting or we're teaching. Ask permission before touching. So I've worked with a lot of kids that have hygiene issues. And just so you know, I think that like teenage boys in general have hygiene issues. That is such a like that is a broad brush statement. But there's a lot of teenage boys out there that have hygiene issues. And so they'll be like just growing their beards and like half their sandwiches in it. And, you know, the Amanda 10 years ago would have been like, dude, and I would have just like grabbed the sandwich. But now I've slowed myself down and I'm like, hey, you've got half a sandwich in your beard. Do you mind if I ask first? And sometimes I get a no, and that person wants to handle it on their own, and that's totally fine, right? Explore ways to say no. So again, verbally and non-verbally. Um, Practice reading nonverbal cues. Maybe that's in a TV show, maybe that's in a movie, maybe that you go to the park and you're just watching, or I mean, people watching in a non-creepy way, right? Role play scenarios, especially in preparation for specific events or activities. So, like, I recently went to a place I was doing an observation and a young man came up and hugged me and I had no idea who he was. Had no idea who he was. And he looked like a grown man. He had, you know, longish hair, he had a big bushy beard, and then he was wearing a graphic t-shirt. He looked like a man anyway, and he hugged me and he was in a safe place and he was with the safe people and he was so sweet and he was so happy and he was a light. I'm telling you, he was just a light in that whole place. But I think about him and I'm like, I really worry about what happens in, you know, public. And I found out from the people that worked with him that they were working on that with him, that he really likes kids and he thinks kids are cute and he wants to go up and try to high five. And yeah, and you can imagine how that can be a problem, right? So role playing the scenarios and saying, you know, we want people to think that you're friendly and not scary. So let's practice just waving or saying hi, and we have to keep going when we're in the store because that would be unexpected behavior if we stopped and touched somebody that we didn't know. And that's how you pair that, you know, this is a stranger and they might be a little kid and you think they're harmless, but their parent isn't harmless, maybe, right? But they may be harmless, but it's very unexpected and it might be even unsafe for you to talk to them or touch them. So, just an example of how you could role play that scenario. Model consent and live out loud to demonstrate. So maybe you, as a parent or a caregiver, want to just talk out loud a particular situation. So, you know, my sister called. She really wants me to go to this Mexican restaurant with her to have dinner, but I just had Mexican last night, so I really don't want Mexican. So I think I'm going to ask her if she doesn't mind going and getting pizza instead, right? Isn't that simple? But living out loud and sharing how you process options and how you process the world is so helpful to someone who just hasn't figured out all those things, right? And a young person doesn't, but a person with intellectual and developmental disabilities as a young person, even as a grown person, if they haven't had this education, could benefit from it. Um, and then create a consent routine and incorporate asking consent into those daily routines. And I know as someone who went through the early morning routine with a super sassy 8-year old who did not want to wear or eat or do anything that I was asking her to do, like it takes time and you have to prioritize and you have to figure out where can I incorporate consent into this routine? Where can I start to build this skill set? Maybe it is I let that person pick out their clothes for the next day of school. Maybe I let that person pick out, where what we're going to eat 1 or 3 days a week or something like that. But just incorporating it, right? Maybe they get to pick out the shampoo and the smell that they want to use, things like that. There's lots of ways to create a consent routine, but it does take time and it takes some planning because it takes some extra time, right? I did it. Look at that. On the dot. I gave 15 minutes for questions if we have any.
Oh my goodness, I'm impressed, Amanda. I'm
I can't believe
impressed.
it.
Yes, if anyone has any questions, feel free to raise your hand or unmute, or you can put in the chat, whichever is best for you. You're also welcome if you want to keep it anonymous. If you have an anonymous question, you can send it directly to me and I will read your question out to Amanda. So no one has to know who's asking it if it's a little bit more of a personal question. I know sometimes this topic can be hard to ask questions at. So feel free to just send me a personal message and I'll be happy to read that out to Amanda. But feel free to unmute if you're ready now. And I'm also going to just put in the chat our evaluation. I would greatly appreciate if you could just complete that quickly before you drop off as well.
Well, hopefully I didn't just bore everybody. Is everyone asleep? Maybe they all went to sleep because I bored them with this topic. If I did that, hmm.
I didn't fall asleep. I'm paying attention. I sorry, I'm doing a couple things and actually talking with the young person that I'm working with off and on, which is why I'm off camera. But I'm I'm curious if you think this would fall under the dignity of risk. I'm working with a 19-year-old who really presents as neurotypical and is in what I believe is a sexual relationship with a 16-year-old.
Mm,
And I'm concerned about the ages.
mm,
And what we've discussed is that this is just not appropriate. We can't have a relationship when we're over 18 with someone who's under 18. This is potentially problematic. And it is, I mean, like this is a relationship where they went to homecoming together. So this is lovely and wonderful. And
yeah.
I want there to be the ability to make mistakes, but I get really nervous around the age thing. So I'm curious for your thoughts.
Yeah, so this is where I will always, so there's a couple of categories that I like to frame things when supporting someone and talking them through situations. And this one would be a legal, illegal situation, right? So this isn't a judgment call. This isn't your opinion. This is the law, okay? And unless I believe I know in Ohio, the age of consent is 16. All right. I know that. And I know that if someone is over the age of 18, that even if um, that person is 16, there can be issues if the relationship goes sour. Okay. There can be legal issues and someone could file charges, and I've seen this happen. I've seen it happen and I've seen it get pretty ugly because there was a bad breakup or there was just a bad fight. So I that would be my recommendation, is like really looking at what are the legal implications of this. If there are ways to support a legal relationship, that I guess in this situation, this is just an idea, seriously, would be like totally chaperoned, totally supervised kind of situation until someone reached the age of consent, or something along those lines. But having both families on the same page is really, really important. All right. If you have a 19-year-old who is interested in dating someone who's 15 years, is that the age you said, or 16?
16. Yep.
16. So if you have a 19-year-old who's interested in someone who's the age of 16 and their family finds out, they can still cause quite a bit of trouble for someone who's over the age of 18.
Yep. And that's the direction that the team has directed this young adult in. And unfortunately, it's a situation where the family of the 16-year-old is expressing that they're fine with the situation.
Okay.
I'm part of the legal team for the 19-year-old because they're
Right.
not in the care of their parent. But unfortunately, the 19-year-old is making choices that we sometimes can't control. So thank you for that
Well,
confirmation, though. I sensed that we were in the right direction of the legal illegal conversation, and we'll just continue to have that conversation with them.
it is, and here's the thing, like with any behavior, whether it be, a relationship like this, or whether it be masturbation or something like that, like any sort of sexual or developmental behavior, you can't just plug it up, right? You can't just put a stop to it. Any behavior, whether that be, the behaviors that we're trying to adjust when a kid is young, if they have maladaptive or self-injurious behaviors, you have to come up with a replacement behavior. You have to come up with, in this situation, is it a compromise or some sort of like, you guys can see each other, but only when you are with us, right? Or in these are the certain situations that are okay right now. But I mean, it's just a touchy situation. It is a touchy situation because if things, you have to think worst case scenario. What if things go
Mm-hmm.
sour? What if there's a
Absolutely.
breakup? What if a parent catches them doing something and freaks out? Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Those are
Yep.
the things that you have to anticipate, unfortunately. I'm the kind of person who likes to plan for the worst and hope for the best.
Yeah. Oh, no, I am with you. So thank you for that input, and
Thanks for the
we'll
great
keep,
question. That wasn't
yeah.
an easy one, but it was a good one. Anybody else? I did a great job addressing everyone's questions. Well, at least, if anything, if you don't have questions, you have resources, and now have me as a resource. And again, I'm in the greater Cincinnati area, but my email knows no distance. So if you want to email me, I put my contact information in the chat. If you have a specific situation that just feels too personal or just feels too complicated, I'm happy to talk through it. I'm an independent consultant and I was a nonprofit administrator for many years, and I am a terrible, terrible businesswoman. So it might take me really, a couple days to get back to you with a resource or with a call or something, but I am happy to be a resource. This is a very important topic to me. It's very important to me that people are getting access to this information, this education, and ultimately it will support them in being safe and happy and healthy and whole. And that is why I'm in the field that I'm in.
I have a question.
All right.
Um, I'll just preface this by I'm a blunt mechanic, and that's just how I am.
All right. Let's.
I have a 14-year-old. My wife and I have a 14-year-old son that is on the spectrum. He has a lot of sensory issues, and we have struggled with going to the bathroom, like with urination just in general. He does not want to touch his penis.
Mm-hmm.
And we are struggling with how to make that work, especially with school, because he still wants to just pull his pants all the way down like a toddler to go to the bathroom.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. That is a tough one. I mean, the short answer to that, the easiest is just to take him to a stall and let him sit down.
That's generally what
What?
we do.
Mm-hmm.
But then we're
And
getting questions
then,
now of, well, my friends get to stand and use the urinals. Why can't I?
well, I mean, you're gonna have to. There are ways to come to get around this. I would recommend working with an occupational therapist, that a creative occupational therapist who doesn't just work on handwriting or fine motor skills,
Yeah.
someone who works on like adapting things, and they can really troubleshoot around the sensory and even maybe something adaptive where he wouldn't have to put his hands on his penis.
Okay.
If that's really what the stumbling block is. But for now, like there's individual use bathrooms, and the other piece is just, I don't know if, I mean, is he opposed to practicing keeping his pants up without Like, I guess it's really hard to do that, isn't it? Would he be opposed to it, though? I wonder. I would work with an occupational therapist, or else we're going to get into like a 30-minute brainstorm with me.
Okay, I appreciate it. Thank you.
But Steve, if that's your real name, don't worry, you don't have to tell me your real name. If you want to talk more about it, if you want to follow up on it, my email and my contact information's in the chat. And when I say that, guys, I'm saying like I'm happy to give free advice and free direction. I'm not saying like contact me and I'm going to charge you. Now, if it's ongoing, that's different. We knew that, right? But I'm happy to point you in a direction, send you a reference or a resource or something. Okay.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
The sensory issues are real. They really do impact our kids when it comes to toileting, when it comes to menstruation, all those things. Those are real issues. And just the fact that you've identified that it's a sensory issue that's holding him back is really going to help you come up with a solution.
All right. Are there any other final questions?
We did it.
Sometimes it takes bravery to
Uh-huh.
like click the unmute
Unmute.
button. So I
Sometimes
know
it's just hard
that.
to find the unmute button too.
Well, that's true too. Sometimes
Hmm.
it just takes a minute to find the unmute button.
Thanks, guys. Thank
But
you.
if, like Amanda said, if anyone has any follow-up, you're welcome to contact Amanda directly. You're welcome to contact me.
Mhm.
And we could definitely get you connected as well, to any resources that you may need. So I just want to thank everyone for coming tonight. Thank you so much, Amanda, for spending the
My
evening
pleasure.
with us and helping us learn. I have a 15-year-old as well with a disability, and I'm learning right alongside all of you. And every day I learn something new, even though I work
I know.
alongside some just amazing professionals, but I still learn something every single day. So it's good that you're here. I've heard um Amanda's presentation a couple of times now, but every time I hear it, I hear something new, and I'm like, oh, okay, I need to maybe try that now. So
Mhm.
uh,
Good.
it's good to attend as many of these as you can as you're going through all the changes and all the things that our
Mhm.
kiddos are and our loved ones and anyone that we're taking care of. They all go through lots of changes. So
I think
all
my
right.
next one's going to be about like midlife and menopause and things like that. What do you think?
Oh man. One step at a time, Amanda. One step at
It
a
never
time.
stops changing, man. It never, I mean, seriously, we just never
Well,
stop
that's
changing.
true. I
Hmm.
mean, yep, absolutely.
It's not a question, but I have a piece of advice for all the dads of any sons. We came up with a thing for mine because he has no silence in the bathroom, and we'll talk to all the people that are in there. But we came up with a funny saying. We call it the men's room code of silence.
Oh, very good. You came up with a
Oh,
rule. Rules work so good, Steve.
And but it's worked really well for him. I don't know if it worked well for any of the other dads, but it works great because we talk about it every time before we go in. It's the men's room code of silence. When we get
All
back
right.
out, then we can talk about it.
Has
I
he called
like
anybody out
that.
yet? Has he yelled at anybody for breaking the men's code yet?
Oh yes.
Yeah.
That's what
Yeah.
happens.
Hey, we
That's
love him
awesome.
though.
Oh my God,
Yeah.
that's great. What a great way to end the session. Thank you for that awesome anecdote.
Yes, absolutely. All right. Well, thank you all very much. I'm going to push stop on the recording now.